check tool changes, new pulleys, new belt, new solenoid, clean the fan, do all the maintenance work. Don't let it look like my machine. That's it. Hello everyone, I'm the CNC repairman. If you're watching this video, hopefully you have an old machine. And hopefully it's the right vintage of old machine where it has a shop pin for orientation. I'm the CNC repairman. Are your spindle belts? I'm going to show you how the Niagara Falls tool is. You may be wondering, how do I adjust this? Maybe you broke your spindle belts, had to pull out your spindle, had to change your gearbox. Basically, you'll need to readjust the orientation between the ring and the shop pin, which includes the gearbox and the spindle, anytime any part of that mechanical linkage is taken apart or separated. So how does it work? This ring clamps onto the output of the gearbox. The gearbox is a belt that ties to the spindle. When you give it an M19 to orientate the spindle dogs to change a tool, what happens is the gearbox turns slowly until the notch here in this ring lines up with the notch on this shop pin. So the air pressure in this piston pushes into here, this drags, it'll keep going, and it'll only go for so long, and if it never clicks in, you'll get a spindle orientate alarm. And if it doesn't click in, you could have a switch issue, you could have an O-ring issue, this could be in the wrong place, you're gonna have to pull the head cover and look. But I'm talking about how to set the orientation. For instance, if you change spindle belts. So what has to happen is that this notch has to line up using this tool with the dogs in the spindle to be parallel with X to do a tool change. Now, that all sounds kind of complicated, and this is a taper lock collar, and if you have an old black one, they can be really hard to bust free, and then you're working with an extension this long down behind the motor. So I'm going to show you a trick. I've done this in the field many times. I'll use this alignment tool. We'll probably want a belt tension tool right here. We're going to want a shop pin. It doesn't need to be new, it can be the one that you have. And let's go ahead right here and let's line everything up. So make sure your machine is on and it has air pressure. Let's go. I've got the head cover off. I've got a video about how to do that. I have the tool release piston unbolted, and we're gonna check the spindle orientation, but I know it's off. So let's go ahead and check it. MDI, I'm gonna run an M19. It's gonna run the spindle until it locks. Now let me unplug that motor. Let's see. Okay, got rid of that. So I ran an M19 in the spindle, the gearbox turned, the shop pin went into the divot, it's locked. But if I look down here, orientation is not correct. It's not gonna perform a tool change. So I'm gonna clear this. The shop pin, I just heard it pop out when you hit reset, and I can spin the spindle. I'm gonna screw in this orientation tool and lock the dogs in, and there's not a right or wrong side. Just as long as the dogs are parallel with X. Got a 5/32 bit driver. We're gonna stick this up. There's a bunch of gunk. Old machines, things are a little tight. Okay, that's going in. At this point, the spindle is locked, so don't do an M19. Don't try to run the spindle. And I did that and checked the orientation before I disconnected anything up here. We can disconnect the pre-charge, but we don't want to disconnect the air line coming in here. We're going to need to take off this switch. And if there's sheet metal right here, you can just set this up. And I also already have the power disconnected from that guy. We'll just leave that one connected. So now we're looking in here, and nothing's going to turn. I'm going to loosen up the gearbox, pull it forward, pop the belts. Last bolt is out. I'm going to pull the gearbox forward, And I'm gonna pop the belts off of the spindle first, because they won't really come off the gearbox pulley without some slack. And I've got to raise the back one up on the pulley because there's not enough slack. So we'll push it back down, then raise it on the back, then raise it on the front. And it's off. So, spindle is locked. I can grab the motor up here, or I can put my hand in the back, this way or that way, and rotate the gearbox. You can kind of hear it just slightly. So, I'm going to push these belts back, so around the back pulley, they aren't touching the pulley at all. Now I've got to reach, you can either try to reach this around to plug it in, or you can just pick up the TRP, set it here, because the machine's going to give a tool unclamp alarm because I have this unplugged. So I plug that back in. Now the air's still onto the machine. It has no idea the gearbox is disconnected. I'm going to just kind of hold it so it doesn't try to turn. What I'm going to do is give it an M19, and the gearbox is going to turn and the shot pin is going to orientate. There's nothing particular about the shot pin, the output shaft, or the grip ring with the slot in it. That's installed here. I'll show you a close-up of that. But I'm going to orientate it. The gearbox is going to turn and it's going to lock. I'm going to leave it orientated. I'm going to pull it forward, slip the belts over the spindle, pull the belts up, well, flip on the gearbox, over the spindle, tighten everything down. Now the orientation is locked. So let's do that. Got this. Boom, you heard it click in. I'll do it again for fun's sake. So, boom. Okay, now we'll find out. I think it'll give you the unclamp alarm, but it won't take it out of M19. I'm going to stick my hand back here and see. Yeah, M19 is still on. I can't move the gearbox. Now I'm going to put the bottom belt on in the back, bottom belt over the front, top belt on, top belt on. Not much to see right here, right now. If you're doing this, the belts, after years of coolant and grime, the belts get nasty. And so if you can wear gloves, I would recommend it. When you get the first bottom belt on, you've got to push it back and put some tension, because we have the spindle locked and the gearbox pulley locked. So you don't want to get the belt one tooth this way and this belt one tooth this way, and you'll never get it tight. So what I'll do is make sure the back belt is on, and then I kind of pull it forward, just slip it over. It may be hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but because both pulleys are locked, and I don't want the tension to be loose on one side of the pulley and loose on the other. Slipped it over, I'll push it back. It'll be obvious. It'll be one belt will be one tooth off. So these are tight now, and everything is good. So I could release this spindle lock, I could release this, hit reset, and the orientation is set. Not necessary, I don't need to climb down and do it. I'm gonna put this on, tension the belts, put down the bolts, and take everything off, and then I'm gonna check a tool change. So a little bit of a shortcut. I don't think you wanna watch me put it all back together, but you see the process. I'll do a quick recap. You're gonna need to put the orientation tool on. You're going to need to pop the belt off, M19, but all the cables have to be plugged in. Unbolt the gearbox, pull the gearbox forward, slip the belts over the back, slip the belts over the front, make sure they're evenly tensioned, tension the belt, push the gearbox back, reinstall the tool release piston, check tool changes before you put the head cover on. Make sure that if you need new pulleys, new belts, new solenoids, clean the fan. If you're up here, do all the good maintenance work. Don't let it look like my machine. That's it. Let's talk about the history of all of these parts. Let's talk about what each one is called, what they do, and kind of issues that will come up. Right here we have the spindle orientation tool 2 bolts on the bottom will bolt into the spindle if the spindle's been installed correctly. So if you're ever swapping a spindle, make sure that you have the bolts line up on this side, the set screw will be in the back. That'll also line up your lubrication port. So that's the spindle orientation tool. Very necessary when doing a shot pin. In a pinch, you can jog the head down, put in a piece of aluminum steel, and you can either lock the jaws or just butt them up. I've done that. This is your orientation lock ring collar. Let me pull it apart here so I can show you. This fits over the main output shaft on the pinion gear on the gearbox. 2 of the bolts are jacking screws and the other 4 are locking. Now, likely on the machine it won't even have the jacking screws, and if you go to take it apart, you're going to have to get a longer quarter 20 because probably the 2 that go in aren't going to be long enough to completely jack it up and out. So the tighter you go, the tighter it locks, and you're going to use these 2 to separate it, pull it off. I have had to cut these. They were just totally seized on. So when you put this on the gearbox, the orientation doesn't really matter unless you're loosening it up to orientate it with the spindle lock. I would do it the other way. That's the orientation lock collar. If you have a machine that has rigid tapping that also has a shot pin, that would be a machine that has a spindle drive in the back, not a vector drive. This little pulley is going to go on the top. This is going to go to the gearbox encoder, and they're going to run together. It actually is the medium-sized belt. So if your machine has a shot pin but no encoder, no pulleys, you can't really do rigid tapping. I've seen people do it with heads, but it's not quote-unquote rigid tapping unless you have the encoder and the pulleys. So basically, a machine like this, when it's not tapping, is running an open loop. It is not keeping track. The RPM on the screen actually doesn't match. Now when you're tapping, the RPM matches, the motif board and everything syncs it. So encoder pulleys tie into the encoder lock ring. If you don't have one of these or your machine has a vector drive upgrade, these are the same size shaft. The sweat-on aluminum pulley will slip over the shaft. Now these 2 have the same size. So it's essentially the same pulley. It's just this is for mechanical orientation, this is for vector drive orientation. That's how they would go. So people who've done a vector drive upgrade, rip this out or leave these in. And I've also seen on some kind of an intermediate machines where they didn't have this, but they didn't have this made yet, there's a black standoff ring that had a couple of set screws, and those can be really hard to get out. So if you're changing this pulley on that, you can either just change this, or you can get one of these, or you can peel that whole thing off and heat this up to about 400 degrees and slip it on. The shot pin block. The shot pin block is a really simple cylinder with 2 air lines that come in off of the 3rd solenoid pack of the gear shift pack. And all it does is just add air pressure on one side to engage and air pressure on the other side to push it out. I've seen these get worn off. I've seen these get worn off. I've seen the O-rings inside them get totally cracked and worn out. You can get a new brass bushing, new pin, all of this stuff from CNC replacement parts. That's how it all works. And if you're doing this, it's really nice to have a tension tool. So quick overview history of how this machine works and why the parts were changed and upgraded. And your machine, some people say they're snowflakes. Everyone is different. So hope you enjoyed the video and hope you learned something. Please come back and watch more of our videos and give us the chance to teach you how to fix them. Thank you.